Become a part of one of the fastest growing Magic the Gathering communities today, Heroes and Legends. Check out the description below to see 2 ways to support the channel. The first is Patreon, where you can get an exclusive Heroes and Legends Classic Art token. See our Patreon page for full details. Or you can explore our Amazon affiliate store, which collects and organizes some of the best MTG deals on Amazon. If you make any purchases from any Amazon sellers through these links, a small percentage will come back to support the channel. Thank you to everyone that makes this channel and its content possible. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends. Today we're going to break down the product Dual Decks Mind vs. Might, which comes out a week from Friday, March 31st. But today Wizards did share the complete deck list for the 2 decks in the product. We're going to talk about those deck lists, go through those cards, and as we do, I'll give you my thoughts on some of the nuances and some of the interactions that we see in these decks. Now, they did show us a few of the cards from the series, but they did not show us everything. So we do have a few cards that do have some new art, but we don't necessarily know if that's going to be all the new art or if there's going to be more. If I didn't have the photo of the new version of the card, what you'll be seeing is the previous printing of the card in paper. Having said that, let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Mind deck. Now, we already know who the face card is for this deck. We saw her last week, but let's take another quick look. It's Yoira of the Get To, and once you see the rest of this deck list, I mean, she will make sense. She's going to do a couple things here. First off, there are some expensive spells that you might be able to find some added value by suspending them out. Secondly, though, there is a Storm sub-theme where sometimes Suspend and Storm do play well together if you can work out the timing right. If I'm able to spend a couple spells and they happen to unsuspend in the same turn and I can play another spell or two that turn, you can really bump up the Storm count. Now, when I say Storm, and you'll see this as we get into the deck list, I mean, don't think you're going to be able to do like 20 damage to your opponent in one turn. I think a 5-6 Storm count is probably pretty reasonable for what this deck's going to be trying to do. But having said that, let's jump into a couple of the creatures first off. And we have Talrand Sky Summoner and Young Pyromancer. So you get 1 copy of Talrand and 2 copies of the Pyromancer, and both of them do a similar thing. Based on instants and sorceries that you cast, you're going to get added value. The Talrand Sky Summoner, of course, gives you a 2/2 blue Drake flying creature every time you do so, and the Pyromancer will give you a 1/1 red elemental creature token. It's just going to help you establish your board presence. Next, we have a couple more creatures that get better based on the spells you're casting. Jory on Runediver, for the second spell you cast each turn, you get to draw a card. And Nivix Cyclops, every time you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this will get +3/+0 till end of turn, and you can also have it attack as if it didn't have Defender. Alright, now the next 4 creatures that you'll see do have a Graveyard Matters focus. You have Sage Eye Avengers, which is a way to potentially get some of your creatures back from the graveyard to your hand. You have the Unspeakable with brand new art. And this one, we're going to talk more about it a little bit later. It is a tad bit expensive, as you can see here, but there is a way to cheat this into play. More on that in a little bit. But again, this is another way to get some of these arcane cards back from your graveyard to your hand. You have Nuclevi, which is a way to get red sorceries or blue instants back. And finally, you have Spellheart Chimera, which is almost like a Nombo with some of these cards because it's really basing its power on the number of instants and sorceries that are in the graveyard, and some of the other cards are trying to take them back out of the graveyard. But at the same time, you're only paying 3 for it, and there should be plenty of value to go around there, I think. Alright, the last 2 creatures in the set are Deep-Sea Kraken, which has a suspend of 9. However, that can be knocked down because if your opponent's in a situation that they have to continue playing Magic, so basically if you're ahead at all and you suspend this, they are going to probably have to react to it in some way, shape, or form. And secondly, you get 2 copies of Goblin Electromancer, which is going to help you cast these instant and sorcery spells much quicker and more efficiently. Speaking of which, let's look at some of these sorceries. So first off, you get 3 copies of Riftbolt. That's actually a really cool inclusion, quite honestly, because this is a card that is very powerful and isn't cheap for common. This had like about a $2-3 value sometimes. So a very nice inclusion with 3 copies here. And finally, you have another Suspend sorcery spell with Siobhan Meteor. Alright, next let's take a look at your Storm suite, and you have Mind's Desire to lead things off. A very, very powerful Storm card. As a matter of fact, the art on this version that you'll get is the art from the Judge's promo. So this has never been in non-foil before. You'll also get a copy of Temporal Fissure, and this is a card that hasn't been reprinted since Scourge, so that's kind of interesting. 2 copies of Empty the Warrens, and finally a copy of Grape Shot. Like I said a few moments ago, I mean, don't expect you to Grape Shot somebody for 20 in one turn with this deck. It's not that efficient, not out of the box anyway. But what this can do is maybe get you some added value with perhaps a 5 to 6 storm count if things are going your way. All right, let's look at a couple more sorceries. We have Beacon of Tomorrows. This is actually a nice financial inclusion. Right now at the time of recording, this is like an $8, $9 card. Very good card for Commander, and it does let you time walk basically and then reshuffle the card back into your library. That's very unusual nowadays. Pretty much whenever you take an extra turn, that card gets exiled. So this is very different, and in the past has led to some pretty degenerative combos. And secondly, you have Volcanic Visions, which was a fantastic limited card back in the day, because not only is it a way to recur something very good from your graveyard in the form of an instant or sorcery, but in some cases it's even a board sweep just for your opponent. This is quite good and worth the casting cost of 7 for sure. All right, let's move on to some instants. We're going to look at the Arcane Spells first, as we know, because we saw the Unspeakable earlier, that Arcane is going to give a little extra value to some of the cards in this deck. First off, you have Peer Through Depths, and you get 2 copies of that. It's going to let you dig through your library a little bit. You have Reach Through Mists, great way to draw a card, real cheap. You get 3 copies of those. And of course, Sift Through Sands, which in conjunction to the previous 2 cards, could potentially help you get the Unspeakable out from your library right into the battlefield, which is actually pretty awesome. And then finally, you get a copy of Desperate Ritual with brand new art. And that's actually another card that has seen a lot of play in different formats in the past, so that's pretty cool. And finally, we'll look at the last 3 instants with Quicken, which is actually a pretty awesome card. 2 copies of Snap, which hasn't been reprinted since Urza's Block. That's kind of awesome. And finally, Firemind's Foresight, which is a great tutor for instants. Lastly, we have the mana base with 4 copies of Swiftwater Cliffs, 10 Islands, and 10 Mountains. All right, let's move on to the Might deck. So if you want to get all in on the beatdowns, this is your deck. It's a little less cerebral than that last deck for sure, but seems like it could be a lot of fun to play. We're going to start off with the card we saw last Monday, and that's the Vosa Cold Eyes. Now, again, this will be the foil card, and it will have the art that you see on the screen here, which is new art for her. But each creature that's a Barbarian, Warrior, or Berserker gets +2/+2 in haste. Now, keep her in mind as we assess the rest of the deck and we go through the creature cards, because basically her hitting the battlefield sometimes could simply be game over for your opponent. It's going to be a huge power and toughness buff, not to mention your cards that have trample and stuff are going to be that much better with her out there. First off, we have a couple creatures that will give you a mana jump. We're going to start off with Burning Tree Emissary. You get 2 copies of her, and Rada Erdekeld. Just 1 copy there, but both ways to get extra mana faster. Couple direct damage creature spells. You have Kamal Pit Fighter, which is a little expensive at 6, but this is a really powerful card. A 6/1 haste creature for 6, but maybe more importantly, it can tap to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. That's huge when it hits the battlefield. And then secondly, you have Zozu the Punisher with brand new art, another card that's going to deal damage directly to your opponent. Now, this can also damage you. You do have to keep that in mind, because whenever a land enters the battlefield, this will do 2 damage to its controller, so that includes you as well. The next 2 creatures both have Bloodthirst. We have 2 copies of Gorehorn Minotaurs and 2 copies of Skargon Pit Skulk. Now, an extra note on the Pit Skulk: 1/1 creature, however, creatures with power less than its power can't block it. You throw the Bloodthirst counter on it, and then maybe Lavissa comes into play. All of a sudden, that becomes a very formidable 1-drop. Alright, the next few cards I wanted to point out are cards that potentially could have trample. You get 2 copies of Kroon Striker, you get a copy of Talara's Battalion, and finally, a Relentless Hunter. And again, imagine with Lavissa in play, these cards become that much better. Alright, in our last group of creatures, these are just some beatdown creatures here. First, we have Baldware Intimidator. What's really cool about this card is if you have the red mana to spend, you can just go ahead and make all of your opponent's creatures cowards, for example, and that means all the warriors, and you have plenty of warriors to start with, are going to be able to get through without being blocked. And secondly, if you need to, if you pay a red and 2, you can make one of your creatures a warrior if it's imperative that it gets across and it happens to not be one. It's a little expensive, of course, it's 7 mana, but once it hits the battlefield, it is definitely game-changing. Secondly, you get 2 copies of Ambassador Oak, which is just nice value. I mean, it is a warrior, so keep that in mind, but also it's a 4/4 power and toughness swing when it enters the battlefield, because you get the 3/3 creature as well as the 1/1 green elf warrior token. Even the token's a warrior, which is nice. And then you get 2 copies of Cloud Crown Oak. And this is a reach creature. It's your only reach creature, basically, other than direct damage. Your only way to deal with flyers. And finally, you have Rubble Belt Raiders, which for 4 mana, this card does a ton of work. A 3/3, and then whenever this attacks, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it for each attacking creature you control. That can become very big very quick. Next, let's move on to some sorcery spells, and we start off with 2 that actually help your board state by giving you creature tokens. You get 2 copies of Call of the Herd and a copy of Roar of the Worm. Both have flashback, and you will see a flashback sub-theme in this deck. And it's not like it's trying to do anything tricky, like it's not trying to get you to mill yourself into flashback or anything like that. It's just simply there for some extra value. Now, the last 4 sorceries you'll find are on the screen here. The first one is Firebolt. You'll get 2 copies of that. Really awesome direct damage spell. Harmonize for some card draw, increasing savagery. Throw some counters on one of your trample creatures. That could be quite good for you. And finally, you get 2 copies of Rampant Growth, which helps you ramp out to your bigger stuff. Alright, let's look at instants. You get a few instants here. A Beacon of Destruction, which is fantastic creature removal, but can also hit a player for 5 and gets reshuffled back into your library. You have a Beast Attack, which is just another way to get yourself a token creature, a 4/4 in this case, but it also has flashback. This time, though, at instant speed. Then you get 2 copies of Sylvan Might, which is another very powerful spell with flashback. Giving your creature +2/+2, that's good, but the fact that it also gains trample at instant speed, that's a pretty big deal. You can kind of surprise somebody in a combat situation with that card quite a bit. And finally, you get a Guttural Response, which is brand new art, by the way. And this is another one of those cards that was not super cheap. Usually these will run you $1 or $2 if you want to pick these up. So it's actually a pretty cool inclusion here. Finally, you get 1 artifact, but it's Coat of Arms, which is a classic artifact. Very good card. Has not been reprinted in quite some time. It was in the Sliver Premium deck series, but then before that it was Magic 2010, I believe. So it's been a really long time. And again, because of that and the fact that this is a fan favorite casual card, it runs you usually about $8, $9 to pick one of these things up, especially if you get one of the newer versions of it. However, it's included here, which is pretty awesome. And you can imagine it can do some pretty crazy degenerate stuff in this deck. Finally, you got your mana base, 4 copies of Rugged Highlands, 11 mountains, and 10 forests. So all in all, the decks look actually a lot of fun to play, and I like the fact that they do zero in on 2 very different types of players. Like I could see somebody who is more of a blue Izzet player really enjoying the Suspend and Storm theme, somebody who's more of a Gruul player having a great time with the beatdown. And at least Wizards promised in the article that they felt that these 2 decks were going to feel very equal against each other. Now that has been an issue with this product in the past. A week from Friday, I guess we'll find out when it comes out. I'm definitely planning on getting a copy and trying it out, and I will let you know if I feel like it's balanced or not. Hopefully it will be, because this actually does look like a lot of fun. I also like the main characters that they feature, the 2 face cards, being both from Dominaria and both being actually really fun cards. I think that those were really nice selections, and I hope it's a clue that at some point we're going back to Dominaria. I don't know if it is or not, or if it would happen anytime soon, but it seems just kind of like a fun thing to speculate on anyway. So, having said that, until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.